Welcome to our part two of 60s fashion lecture. So, we talked about overall things that were happening in history, even going past the 60s into the 70s and 80s. And we talked about women's fashion and overall silhouettes and some of the designers. I wanted to finish up looking at some of the most influential designers and do a summary of the overall men's looks as well. So Pierre Cardin, very popular designer. So the last one we were talking about was Andre Courage. So this is Pierre Cardin, and really just so popular that he had his followers and he had models called the Cardinettes. So as you can tell, this is completely in line with the mod look. As you can see, it has that futuristic look. It has a very minimalist, clean, simple lines, shift dresses, look, bold colors, short hemlines, very geometric, very angular. Okay, you can see the lines. Now, they did have belted looks, so a little bit more definition, but still, because if you don't put a belt here, it's just really shapeless. So it had a little shape, not a whole lot. As you can see for men, same thing. The jackets is just very straight. So it does look, if you really look at this, I don't know if you're familiar with Star Trek, but it has a very Star Trek feel to it. And notice just the bright patterns of color. So the Cardinettes were really popular. And Pierre Cardin, I mean, you can't talk about the 60s without saying his. And it's interesting. He would play with balance and scale. Like you have like these big collars. And again, had just a very futuristic feel, but still played with these kind of simple silhouettes, which I thought was interesting. I've seen this kind of knocked over time and time again. So like having that bullseye. Suspenders, very popular, really big buttons. If you can find anything vintage from the 60s, really interesting to see suspenders and kind of the buttons and the closures that they use, very interesting. To have this, it's very interesting because when you look at something like right here, you could see the panels on the skirt. These are actual panels. It's not painted on. It's actual fabric that's cut in these shapes and then pieced together, which I thought was very interesting. Whereas today, to make it cheaper, it would just be painted on, printed on. So you can see, and you can see the resemblance, right? This was scandalous to have, cutouts where your chest is exposed. Turtlenecks were really big. So you can see it's a simplicity to his designs, but also this kind of modern, very minimalist and yet very futuristic feel as well. It's just very interesting to see. And he played a lot with positive and negative space. He loved the black and white contrast, played with abnormal shapes, loved to do that. And some people liked it, some people don't. It's either your cup of tea or it's not. And yet some classic pieces, so something like the blue and white one where it's very simple sheath dress with some contrast. So playing with that positive negative. So normally the blue would be the item on top of the white. This time the panels are the white ones and the blue dress is underneath. So really kind of play with that positive and negative. You did the lantern dress that got a lot of attention. If you see some of, like, you see the man, the picture in the center, and it has a very almost costumey feel to it. So he played a lot with proportion, texture. These were really interesting to see, the lantern dresses, the cutout. Today we'll see stuff like this and it's done with laser cutters and, special embossing machines that, they didn't have necessarily back then. So it's interesting to see the items now. So I'm not the biggest mod fan, but I definitely appreciate it. And I have to say it completely inspired me. I like to do body harnesses with chains and jewelry. And I've noticed I've taken to the designs Pierre has done. And instead of, like this black panel, I would make it with, with metal. So it's definitely been very inspirational. So I've turned to it. And that's what I want you to be able to do, is even if it's something you don't necessarily like, I don't know if I'd wear that, but you can appreciate it. It's really important. Another designer, Yves Saint Laurent. You can't talk about the 60s without speaking about Yves Saint Laurent, YSL. They have rebranded and now they're known as Saint Laurent because they were on the basically in bankruptcy. They founded, the house was founded in 1962, so early 60s. And as you can see, I gave you a link for a quick video. So you can see it's just kind of a tribute to the designer, Yves Saint Laurent, and it just really kind of, it's basically a tribute, and it's some iconic pictures from him. So you should take a look at him. But he really was, he created some amazing designs and just really classy. So take a look at this. It's a short little tribute. It's like 3 minutes, but it has some really iconic, if you're into fashion at all, or costume design. It has some really good quotes, and it has some iconic pictures of him. So take a look at that, because it's really good. And that's him with his models. I love that. I love this picture. It's one of my favorites. Love that. And love the fitting. I don't know if you do, but I love to see pictures of kind of doing fittings with designers, whether old pictures or new pictures, but I love to see this with his seamstress and helping doing a fitting. And he did some really classy things. He did have a good variety, because he had casual, he did the Mondrian. I mean, this is so, using primary colors and the Mondrian look, and putting artwork into his shift dresses. And he was smart enough to use a very simple shape to put this on. But he had very kind of mature, not for older people necessarily, but a classiness, a mature feel for some of his pieces as well. So he had a lot of classiness, and yet he also had this kind of whimsical look. These were the silhouette one and the body silhouette, where it's like, a side view, a profile view of the naked body, but how he played again with that contrast, the positive and negative, the light and the dark. Really interesting how he did that. So he had a whimsical side, and he had a very practical side too, inspired by like the 40s and the safari, kind of that safari military, elements that he would put on some of his dresses too, and use some really nice rich browns and tans. And the lace, the sequined striped dress. Oh, I love this. This one makes it in fashion magazines all the time, and that lace back is amazing. Loved it. And some of his trims. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite fashion picks, where totally evoking his look. It's funny how designers will design sometimes to as to what they'd wear, like Karl Lagerfeld, and most designers do it to a certain point. And this definitely mimics him. This shot looks like him. And this suit's just impeccable, and there's the lighting. This is one of my favorite fashion pictures. It's in like my top 5 all-time favorite pictures. But great with the suit, the androgynous look, and really big on the menswear inspired. And love a good pinstripe and tuxedo look for women. So power suit for women, man. You'll feel powerful and classy all at the same time. He also had a worldly kind of influence, so you can see it here, and from other parts of the world, and you can see the vibrant colors and the prints and the braided trims that he would use. Loved how he used some of the trim. These weren't my favorite pieces of him, but I still can appreciate it, and I loved his interesting choice. So anytime you can see any of his pieces exhibited, especially those with the worldly influence, it's very interesting. Rudy Gernrich, this one's interesting. This is the bathing suit I showed you with the cutouts, and this is the topless bathing suit, and that was just, or the nipple covers, and this was just considered like, wow. And I gave you a link so you can take a look at it, but very scandalous. You didn't have that before. It caused a lot of uproar. It was very controversial. Rudy did a lot with again, do you notice this pattern of playing a lot with the contrast and a lot of like the geometry, the geometric shapes, and really that illusion, op art going in there, but just a lot of this positive and negative space and a lot of contrast, as you can see. Big with patterns, and just really love playing with that see-through panels, almost to the point where like, whoops, we're going to show something bad, but nope, but just enough. So anytime you see a lot of when it comes back, like we just had that on trend, the skirt, the dresses that had the sheer panel and the sleeves, you got to look at Rudy's work, because that's where we always go back and reference. The giraffe suit, I remember that one. The men's bodysuit. So we saw the men's romper that came in and out really quick, and it was, yeah, some very interesting, whimsical looks. Paco Rabanne is another one that really, really influential in the 60s. Look at that. And a lot with the paillettes. Oh my gosh, paillettes. So these little panels out of plastic, or it could be out of glass. Influence even Alexander McQueen, who did the microscope slides and did paillettes out of that. But Paco Rabanne is like the master for this. And every season you'll see something like this, but fashion with different things. Sometimes crochet, sometimes different paillettes, different metallic pieces, but always these little pieces put together to form one garment. That's Paco Rabanne. He's the one that did this. So you will see this season after season after season, but he is the father of this, and it's just amazing because you have all these put together. And if you've done anything like this, I have, my goodness, the time, and again, worldly influence, and just even if like I said, even if you're not a fan of the aesthetic, man, the way they put things together is pretty amazing. For men, I do want to mention, because I feel bad, we always focus on men's kind of gets forgotten. Just not a lot to say other than it did follow certain overall trends. Now, you did have the suit, men that were in business and they wore their business suit. Best way to describe it, they dress like Don Draper. If you watch Mad Men, Don Draper, you had the hat, the fedora, and you had your suit. The suit did get a little bit more relaxed, but you always wore a suit. Your button up, your tie, your pocket square, your handkerchief, your coat pretty much usually matched your pants, although it started getting a little crazier after that. And you had your casual, you had your sweater, you had your, in this kind of upper middle class and middle class, your chino pants, your khakis, going into that casual look. Men did go into the mod look. They would wear like the plaid pants and, the turtleneck and had that shaggy hair, so that became really popular. So you could see plaid pants every color imaginable. Hippie, when they say, oh, color was embraced in 2000 or in the 90s, no, we had color. In the 2000s, no, we had color before then. Even the 50s, remember? They started wearing pink and bright colors, but in the 60s, it just went all out, far out, crazy. Lots of color, lots of pattern, a lot of contrast. So let your hair grow natural and just, no structured, clean cut look. A lot of texture. So anything shaggy, right? Anything shaggy. When you think shagadelic, you think the 70s. It started in the 60s, actually. And embroidery, bright patterns, whimsical patterns, very artsy, bohemian. The Beatles became so popular. Can't mention this look without the Beatles. And I say to the rescue or not, it may or may not be your cup of tea. Because, they popularized the mod look and then they went with this hippie look. And you either love it or you hate it. Or you can be on something and appreciate the pattern. I don't know. But anyhow, a lot of color. Can't deny the color and the happiness involved in this. So this pretty much sums up the 60s. Thank you for listening.